You're probably familiar with the top male artists of abstract expressionism: Jackson Pollock, Mark Rothko, Willem de Kooning, and Clyfford Still. The names of the women who painted in this style are less well known, but there are many who interpreted important moments in their own lives, as well as the issues affecting women after World War II.
Abstract Expressionism was the very first homegrown American art movement. Post-World War II, everything changed, and the center of the art world shifted from Europe to the United States with Abstract Expressionism.
A lot of the modern movements, the isms, cubism, surrealism, etc., had sort of closed down temporarily, and there might have been a shot for American artists to take the center stage, and in fact that's what happened through the work of the abstract expressionists.
In those post-World War II years, the big-name abstract expressionists were the men. But their female counterparts also played a major role in the development of this art movement, which first flourished in New York and San Francisco in the 1940s and 50s. The Denver Art Museum's curator of modern art thought it was time to give the women their due.
It was important that in this exhibition we could focus on 12 individuals. And in the show, each of these 12 ladies has her own gallery, her own area within the gallery, because we want people to understand that abstract expressionism is a very personal movement, and we wanted each woman to be seen as an individual.
Adjacent to the Denver Art Museum at the Clyfford Still Museum, Director Dean Sobel says that Still, besides being one of the leading male abstract expressionists, was a teacher of men and women artists.
There's something about abstract expressionism that's fascinating, and it happens only rarely, I think, in the history of art or in other cultural art forms, that in different parts of the country and with artists that really didn't know each other, they were all arriving at a similar place in their work. Even though sometimes the work may look somewhat different, there are certain characteristics that absolutely bind them together. And whether they would have preferred to be individuals their whole career, I think they all understood that there was a phenomenon happening within the art world at that time, and they were part of something important.
I think that in the 50s, women still did not get the same kind of place in society or in the art world as men. But yes, the women did exhibit alongside the men. Women were in the same classes with men, but I think there still was a sexism in the art world. For example, Hans Hofmann, who is such a well-known teacher of the abstract expressionist artists, very famously he said to Lee Krasner, "Lee, this is so good you would not know it was done by a woman."
The whole subject of sort of gender inequality in the art world or art history is problematic and tricky. I mean, certainly before the Second World War, let's face it, most of the art dealers were men, most of the collectors were men, the people writing about art were men, and so women sporadically appear in the history of 20th century art, but it's really not until, I think, probably the 60s or 70s when women artists finally move into that mainstream.
In fact, the standard tome that most of us took our first art history surveys with was Horst Janssen's History of Art, and it's hard to imagine, but it wasn't until 1986 that there was even one woman profiled, one woman artist profiled in Janssen's History of Art.
I think one of the most frustrating things about the women artists was the number of instances in which the women either forfeited or gave up their careers to serve, if you will, or to further the careers of their male husbands or companions. Lee Krasner is an excellent example. Her work in the 1940s, early 1940s, is exceptionally advanced. Abstract expressionist before it really had a name, but because of various reasons, her devotion to Pollock, his alcoholism, she really did make the conscious decision to move her career to second place.
What the early abstract expressionists had in common was transferring both feeling and content to their canvases.
Mark Rothko said there's no such thing as good painting about nothing. That color and design and form were just part of what was operating within their paintings. And so if we think about what subject matter embodies a lot of great art and literature, it's probably the great grand themes of creation, life, death. Something that you really notice when you get closer to these images is how much you can see the mark making of the artist. And that can be Clyfford Still's poured and drip paint, the masterful brushwork of someone like Willem de Kooning, or in the case of Still, where he uses palette knives, you can actually see it kind of spread and sculpted across the surface.
These paintings are about process and experimentation. And the women of abstract expressionism were trying all kinds of new techniques and new media, just as the men of this period were. So we have large paintings, lots of color, lots of texture, layer upon layer, and they are grappling with what it means to respond to their experiences of the world.
The exhibit of women abstract expressionists, first mounted in Denver, has now moved on to Charlotte, North Carolina, where it's being shown at the Mint Museum, and after that in the spring to the Palm Springs Art Museum.